So a lot of us, if you use social media, you're pretty used to at this point the ads that appear on it, the sponsored content, various companies, and it's eerie sometimes the amount they seem to know about you. Sometimes it feels as though you specifically are being targeted, and it turns out that might actually be the case. There's this ad company called The Spinner, and what they do is you can pay them a few $100s, and they will target a specific person. You can name the person, and they will target ads that only show up to that person. So they offer services like, do you want to get a coworker to quit their job? We'll do a campaign target them, showing them ads about how to quit your job if you're not happy. This is an actual picture on their site, how to convince your ex to get back with you. So if you feel like somebody's stalking you, that might actually be the case. One of them advertised, you can send subtle hints to your boyfriend with articles about like how to propose because he should propose already. And my favorite, if your kid finds about $300, you can target your parents with a buy your kid a dog campaign. That's going to make me think the next time I see any dog-related stuff show up on my timeline. But it makes you feel kind of cynical, doesn't it? Like, really? Is this what we've come to? Why can't you just tell me? Open your Bibles with me to Genesis chapter 27. Continuing through the lives of the patriarchs here, we come to the end of Isaac's life. He's got two sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob has already cheated Esau out of his birthright and inheritance. We're told at the beginning of the chapter, when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." And he said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food, such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." So in that culture at that time, the final blessing that you would give your children before you died was hugely important. It would be a special individual thing, and you would speak over their life. And he says, "Esau, I want to bless you specifically." Because remember, Esau was his favorite. So before I die, go hunt something, cook it for me, and I'm going to bless you before I die here. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. Now, Rebekah's favorite son wasn't Esau. It was the other son, Jacob, Mama's boy who lived in tents. Now, Rebekah also knew, though, what God had told her about her two sons. God had promised her before they were even born. As they struggled in the womb, God said, "The older will serve the younger." And so, Rebekah, hearing that Isaac plans on blessing Esau, she says, "No, we've got to trick him." Think about the level of deception involved. Your husband is dying, and number one on your list is she tells her son Jacob, go and get one of the goats from the herd, and we're going to cook a dish for you, Dad. You're going to pretend to be your brother because you need to get that blessing. If you're wondering where Jacob learned to be deceptive, here's a good indication. Dad can't hardly see, so just pretend to be your brother. I'll cook the meal. But Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, "Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man." And Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her older son, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. As they killed the young goats, she took the skins, she put on his hands and the smooth part of his neck. She put the delicious food and the bread which she prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. So this tells you about how hairy Esau was. You could pet a goat and not tell whether you're touching your son's neck. Any guys here got back hair like that? I'm just curious. And so she literally takes goat skin, puts it on Jacob, and says, "Let's go trick Dad before he dies." And it works. Isaac is confused by Jacob's voice, but when he feels his arm and smells his cloak, he blesses him, and here's what he says to him. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. Jacob leaves. Esau comes in. Dad, I'm ready for my blessing. We're told that Isaac trembles violently, realizing what has just happened. And the way those things work, he tells Esau, look, I can't give you the blessing I just gave your brother. I can't just say the same thing. I've already given him lordship over you, and there's not much left for you. You can imagine the feelings this created between the two brothers, already tense. He told in verse 41, now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. Now, it's often the case that family feuds are drawn out, right, at a funeral or the period around that point. But I've yet to worry about somebody pulling out a gun at a funeral I've performed. And this is the case. Rebekah hears about this and warns Jacob, and he flees for his life. And on the journey, God appears to him. And God gives him the same blessings that he promised to Abraham and to his father Isaac. God says, I am going to make a people out of your descendants. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to give this land to your descendants. And here's how Jacob responds. Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. So God blesses Jacob. And when God blesses you, that's something entirely different than somebody praying over you. And Jacob responds to him and says, look, I'm fleeing for my life. I'm going to try and find his uncle Laban. I've got nothing. If you will be with me as I go and bring me back, you're my God. He also says, and this wasn't where I was going with this, but he mentions here that if you do this, everything that you give me, I'll give a tenth to you. In the church, those of you who grew up in church, you're familiar with the term tithing. Tithe means tenth. Now, this would later be commanded in the Old Testament system of law. For all the Israelites, that a tenth of everything they had, they were to bring and give at the temple of the Lord. Now, in the New Testament, we're not commanded to tithe in the same way, but there's still this example. All through Scripture, this is before the law was given. Abraham, his grandfather, had given a tenth to God after victory in battle. And here Jacob says, God, if you bless me, I will return a tenth to you. So he makes it. He gets there to the town of his uncle Laban, and he sees her daughter at a well. Now, some of you guys, you remember when you were younger, and you see a cute girl, and you got to tell yourself, play it cool, act like nonchalant, or, don't seem too eager. And here is his first reaction to seeing her. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud because she was very beautiful, Laban's daughter. After a month of staying with Laban, he asked Jacob, you're working in my fields. How do you want me to pay you? Leah's eyes were weak, so Rachel had a sister, an older sister, 2 daughters of Laban. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, okay, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. It was customary at the time, if you were going to marry a woman, you would give the father a dowry, a payment for the privilege of marrying the daughter. Jacob had nothing, so he says, look, if you just let me work it off for you, I'll give you 7 years of my life for her. Laban agrees. 7 years pass. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Finally, the day comes. The wedding feast arrives. Now, here in America, right, we have the wedding ceremony, You say I do, and then you have the reception afterwards. In the ancient Near East, they had like a week of feasting. All your relatives come in. I mean, can you just imagine a week-long party with the ceremony thrown in there? And so that's what happens here. And finally it comes time, everybody's eating and drinking, but Laban has another plan for Jacob. When it comes to bring the bride into the groom, in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her, and in the morning, behold, it was Leah. Don't you hate it when that happens to you? I can only guess that large amounts of alcohol were involved in this.
Had to be.
I mean, he wakes up in the shock, and imagine also the message it sends to Leah. She's complicit in this deception. And by the way, this is why we're like racing through these chapters. I'm condensing a lot of this, because I just wanted you to get a sense of the nature of Jacob's life. He literally just did the same thing to his brother, right? I'll pretend to be him, and Laban's having like the same conversation with Leah. Just pretend to be her. You know, we'll give him extra wine, and he won't know the difference. Jacob goes and confronts Laban and says, What did you do to me? And Laban says, well, you know, it's not traditional. We don't marry off the younger daughter first. He could have told him this 7 years ago. And he said, no, I didn't want to marry off the younger daughter first. And so he says, I get that you love Rachel, so tell you what, I'll give you a 2-for-1 deal. He says, complete the week of this one, and we'll give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. So he doesn't make him wait like another 7 years to get the woman he really wanted to marry. But he's like, well, you're already locked in on Leah. Let me throw in the extra package, the add-on daughter, for the low price of 7 years. And he does it because he loved her. So 2 weddings in a row. And again, Leah, in all of this, you know, great, now I'm married, but I'm such an incredible disappointment. First to my parents, because nobody wanted to marry me. Younger sister gets married first, and then now I'm married, and I know that my husband doesn't love me. I bet you the rest of her life she remembers the look of disgust on his face when he realized that she was the one he'd spent the night with. After he works another 7 years, he's the target of scheming again, because now there's this feud that develops between Leah and Rachel. And they begin competing to see who can have the most babies. Because, yeah, so you're like, I'm out. As Sarah said after Finn, I'm out. But for that culture in that time, your value as a woman had a lot to do with your ability to bear children, in particular, male children. And so they're telling themselves, he will love me if I have another son for him. And then when Rachel's unable to have children, she convinces Jacob to take one of her servants as a secondary wife so that she could claim any children her servant bears him as part of her score tally. And then Leah, when she sees this happening, she's like, well, I can do that too. Here, take my servant as another wife. Now I've got like 5 to your 3. And Jacob's just caught in the middle of all this. And again, if anybody would ever argue against polygamy, watching the repeated drama that it brings throughout the patriarchs is argument enough. Jacob will eventually end up with 4 wives and 12 sons. And the character of all of this is a constant bitterness and scheming and plotting. At one point, the wives are trading each other like, I want some of those mandrakes, I'll give you a night with Jacob, give me those. 14 years of working for Laban. Jacob wants to head home with his growing family. Laban says, you know what? I've learned that God's blessing me because of you. I don't want you to leave. Laban tells him, name your wages and I'll give it. Let me tell you, you'd be a fool to trust him at that point, but he does. And they come to an agreement where like all the goats born with like stripes would belong to Jacob. and the ones without would belong to Laban. Several years of scheming against each other over goats and sheep. 6 more years of this, Jacob finally leaves. And as he leaves, he says this to his wives. You know that I served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he changed and said, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. So after 20 years gone, Jacob returns to the promised land, a wealthy man with a large family. Despite his own scheming, despite the scheming of other people, God was faithful to Jacob and blessed him. And yet, that is not the life that most of us want to live, is it? There's this constant deception and angling and working the angles. Can anybody relate to that in your life? You feel you've been treated like that? Let me tell you, con men are as ancient as human life itself. People have acted like this from day one. The ancient Greeks invented insurance for boats. You're taking a boat on a trading voyage. You could buy insurance in case the boat sank, so you wouldn't be out, the money of the cargo on the boat. And 10 seconds after they invented that, you know what they invented? Insurance fraud. And so you can find in ancient contracts stipulations of what's going to happen to you if I find that boat still afloat that you claimed insurance on. We've been doing this from day one. There's this guy, Gregor McGregor. In the 1920s, this guy made up a country in Central America. He just made it up. He brought fake brochures talking about how great, this land was and rich in resources. And he brought it to England. He began selling people rights to businesses. Here, I'll sell you some land out there. And he made the modern equivalent of $4 billion doing this. And all those people got on that boat and they show up and there's this empty jungle. And he retired in Venezuela and lived a wealthy man for the rest of his life. Yeah, there's a part of us that smiles at that as Americans, isn't it? A begrudging respect, perhaps. But then, more recently, we had the celebrities and wealthy people who paid scam artists to cheat their kids into good colleges. And everybody's like, oh, that's ridiculous. And this has been going on a long time. There's part of this that says, well, that's just the way the world works. The largest GoFundMe campaign in the company's history, $400,000 to help a homeless guy who gave his last $20 to a woman stranded and out of gas. Except court documents later proved that it was a made-up story to get money out of people. Let me just ask you, raise your hand, how many of you have been cheated by your employer at work? How many of you have cheated your employer? I was wondering, if I get different responses, I could do the same. I could go and ask companies, how many of you have been cheated by your employees? Oh, yeah, they're terrible. How many of you have cheated your employer? Well, see what had happened was. It's not just in money that we manipulate people, right? Ask anybody who becomes rich and famous and the difficulty that they have. From that point on in their life, they are always asking themselves the question, does this person who wants to get close to me, do they value me as a person, or do they value what I can do for them? It's the same for those of you who have trucks, right? You've got all those people who don't have trucks, and you're wondering in the back of my mind, are they just keeping me in their friend list and for when they want to move? Right? You probably know people who don't talk to you till they need something from you. And then they'll call you up and they'll want to chat. And you're just waiting for it to come, aren't you? Maybe you've had a friend reach out to you after a long time, and you knew her back in high school, and how's everything? And then you realize, no, she's just selling makeup now. Or essential oils or sweatpants or something. Wants to sell me a home business. Can we be honest that we've all been like this at times? I had a phone call. My Uncle Mike runs a mission organization. And I hadn't talked to him in a long time. I mean, we're both like crazy busy, and he's always traveling and stuff. So I got him on the phone. I had this conversation, just catching him up on my life. And at one point he goes, "Hey, Aaron, I'm a really busy guy. I just got to ask, what is the purpose of this phone call?" You see, the truth is that at that time I was looking for a position in the church. It was actually the process that led to me being here. And I had called my Uncle Mike up because I thought he might know of a church that maybe was looking for someone. You know how hard that hit me in the gut to say that? It is so easy for all of us to begin to treat people like objects or to look at them in the way that they could benefit us in some way. To look to just pull those levers of influence. I mean, it's not wrong to ask for favors, but the way that we use people, we end up like Jacob. And here's the thing in Jacob's life. It was defined both by his scheming and being schemed against. And I just found it to be a general principle that the people I know that are devious in their dealings with other people, their lives are surrounded by that same kind of thing. I don't know what it is, but anytime I've ever heard anybody complain to me about, I hate drama. There's just so much drama. For whatever reason, they're the person causing at least half of it in their life. How can we live differently? 2 Corinthians 4:2 says this. Apostle Paul writing about his ministry, "But we have renounced disgraceful, underhanded ways. We refuse to practice cunning or to tamper with God's word, but by the open statement of the truth, we would commend ourselves to everyone's conscience in the sight of God." Now he was talking about their ministry and saying, look, guys, we kept nothing hidden from you. We were not deceptive when we were with you. Remember talking to two young guys, and one of them was saying, I ended up, in church because he told me this girl I liked was going to be at this church function, and he lied to me about it. She wasn't there. And the other guy was like, yeah, but he came to Jesus, so it's all good. I'm like, no, that's not how this works. We refuse to practice cunning or to tamper with God's word. I'll say for me personally in ministry, man, it's so tempting because sometimes I'll choose here's where I want to preach on or an area, and then I'll realize in preparation that that passage in the Bible doesn't really say that. You know how easy it is doing what I do to just kind of make it say what I want it to say? I can make those words dance on that page. But I've just resolved that I would rather change the message than change the word. I also wanted to just take a moment and let you guys know that I am never preaching, trying to send a hidden message to you. I may happen to preach about safe driving practices, but I'm not sitting there writing a sermon with Steve in mind. It may happen that the things I speak about might directly have something to do with your life, but I just resolved for me personally, I never want you guys guessing, is he trying to say something to me indirectly by hinting about it in a sermon? To just decide, I don't want to ever live like that. But it's not just in ministry. You cannot be an underhanded, cunning person and follow Jesus. Again, the same letter at the start, it says, "For our boast is this, the testimony of our conscience, that we behaved in the world with simplicity and godly sincerity, not by earthly wisdom, but by the grace of God, and supremely so toward you. Simplicity and sincerity. It should never be said of any Christian that they're operating with a hidden agenda in our relationships or in our businesses. What would people say about you? It may be a scary thing to ask. If you have a friend that you trust to tell you the truth, ask them and say, what is the witness of my life? Do people know me as a sincere person who tells the truth and is not devious? There is a worldly wisdom. People say, well, that's the way the world is. Everybody's out to get everybody else. And you just got to get yours. You just got to look out for yourself. And if you round off a few numbers or mislead a little bit, you're not doing anything different than anybody else. He says we're called to live different, not by the wisdom that the world uses, deceiving and being deceived. He says, but by the grace of God. Now, I want you to understand there's going to be cost involved. In a world of schemers, if you are saying, I'm going to intentionally be open and honest and sincere, there are times that it will cost you when you could have done differently. So as we propose our church budget this year, discovered as, was going through and saying, okay, what do we have to do to file taxes, that currently we didn't have any reporting the way we should for paying Pete, our worship leader, Denise, our cleaning lady. Once I became aware of this, I talked to the tax people, and she said, yeah, legally, you should be paying them with the W-2. And it's going to cost the church about $600, the difference for withholding on our end and paying to have the taxes filed. And she even said, with the way it works and the way audits work, if you do nothing, you would never get caught. Of course, now I'm putting this on YouTube, so I just want to say to any IRS agents watching this, we're filing correctly now. But she's like, yeah, you probably wouldn't get caught. But if we're going to behave in the world with simplicity and godly sincerity, just to remind you guys, that applies to tax time. Matthew 10:6, Jesus says, behold, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. I want to be clear on all this, because sometimes people are worried that to do this faithfully means being an idiot, or willfully letting yourself be deceived. I'm not saying that you should buy that used car that you can tell he's spinning you a yarn about. I have people call me up, looking for assistance through the ministerial lines. And part of my job in that is to be as wise as serpents. You need to be discerning. You know when that person's calling you up just because they need to borrow your truck for the weekend. And yet we are not to harm anyone. So what does this look like? When I was working through college the second time, I made redneck leather belts. I Googled redneck leather belts, and I made that belt. It was like the 5th image search result. Personally proud of that. So I was the only employee for this company, and the guy I worked for was an atheist. And they had various people in there who were either lazy or thieves, but the guy right before me that they had hired called himself a Christian, worked for them for a few years. Then when he left, he stole all their designs, set up his own business making the same belts, undercut their price to their biggest supplier, and cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars of business. And the truth is, as I worked for him, he began to really trust me. So I got paid by the piece. I got paid $1 per belt I made. Do you know how much more money I could have made by making a lower quality product? I could probably have doubled my rate if I wasn't really careful with how I was like airbrushing the Confederate flags on these belts. But at the time, I was growing in faith. I was preparing for a life in ministry, and I was like, man, I never want to deceive him or hide anything from him, because I make these stacks, and sometimes you just walk by and look at the belts, and it was tempting to take the best looking belts from the batch, put them on top, because I knew I wasn't going to dig, right? Put the best, face forward. I never wanted to feel like I was deceiving him. Not in shoddy work. Never to curve things to my advantage. Because here's the difference, and here's, if you find yourself struggling with this, because sometimes, it's because somebody's hurt you. And if I say something to this person about that person, I feel justice will be done, or I feel that I need this to get by. Here's how we avoid living like Jacob, because when you think about Jacob's life, here's the truth. Did Jacob benefit from his plots? No. God had promised him before he was born he would get the greater blessing. So all his scheming, his plots, lying to his dad on his deathbed, got him nothing. All of his scheming could not get him anything more than what God had already promised to give him. And then when he goes through 20 years with his uncle Laban, all of the scheming of other people could not remove from him what God had already given him. And so if we want to learn to live with godly grace towards other people in sincerity and simplicity, it is learning to trust that what is most important in my life cannot be gained by cheating other people. Cannot be gained through deception or spin or anything like that. And what is most important in my life cannot be taken away from me by other people doing the same. Because sometimes we're afraid. We know it's lopsided, right? You ever been there and you know that somebody is out there talking about you, and they're, hatching plans about you, and they're spreading tales about you, and we have this temptation. I've got to fight fire with fire. You don't need to. Somebody could hatch a successful plot against me and take away my life. But it wouldn't remove a single thing when I stand before God on the last day. So I want to encourage you guys to reflection, self-reflection. God, what are areas in my life, either in the past or now, that I've treated people based on what they can do for me? That I've been less than honest in my dealings with people? God, help me to trust you. Help us to live by your grace. Let's pray. God, I thank you that we have, like Jacob, an inheritance that is promised to those who love you. And that it's something that can't be taken away or added to by any plot that we or anyone else could devise. So God, I pray that we would be known as people of our word, not in any way two-faced or schemers or tricksters. God, even if that is the case in our life now, that you would bring about the change of heart that comes when somebody trusts you with the outcome of our life. That we will say, as Jacob did, that you are the one who protects us. In Jesus' name, amen.